Okay, morning everyone. We will resume where we left off. We'll start by dedicating the shiur to the memory of my aunt, Leah Bat Yaakov, passed away aged 105 and 11 months last Sunday. Last Sunday, a week ago. After a long and very fulfilled life, she has left us finally. It's quite weird to think that she's no longer with us after all this time, but those of you who want to pay your respects to Jeffrey and Marcel, they will be returning this week. I think Jeffrey tomorrow and Marcel on Wednesday, and we're hoping to do something special for the Shloshim here in Netanya. So that's for then. Right. Who can remember what we were talking about 3 weeks ago? I can't. Any of you remember what you were doing 3 minutes ago? Okay, 3 weeks is a long time. Okay, I didn't remember either, but I went and had a listen to the end of last time's shiur, and what we were talking about was the end of chapter 25. Let's just turn that phone off if I can find it. That's it. The pocket, there it is.
So the one posture was out of place or something?
It was no. I'm glad to see that Avril is back this week, because she very cleverly last week's predicted that it might not be suitable for her 12-year-old granddaughter, because we were talking about the marriage of Michal to Paltiel at the end of the chapter. Let's get it on the screen and see what is going on. Right, there's the screen. Right, remember, right at the end of the chapter, Shaul natan et Michal bito eshet David lapalti ben Laish asher migalim. And Saul had given his daughter Michal, wife of David, to Palti, the son of Laish. And we questioned this. We questioned how could Saul do such a thing, because Michal was already married to David. Anybody? There were 3 explanations, and we went through one of them. And I promised you the other 2 right at the end of the shiur last time. I promised you the other 2. But who can remember the first one that we went into in quite some detail last time? How could this be such a thing? Anyone? Oh, gosh.
We all fail. We all fail.
You'll remember when I tell you. I'll give you a clue.
An elderly man.
One of them what you were going to carry on with, explain for me, was that Shaul thought he didn't exist anymore because he had a death sentence on him.
Right, okay, that was the one we were going to do. Yes, that's right. That's what we're going to start with in a minute, Paul. But last time's one, I'll give you a clue. It involved a sword.
He kept the sword in the bed.
Yes, that's right, Barbara. Well remembered. Palti realized that Michal was Eshet David, that she was the wife of David, and therefore, despite the fact that Michal was a very beautiful and sought after, a desirable woman, he managed to avoid falling into the trap of the terrible sin of Eshet Ish, of having relations with another man's wife. And the way he did so was, according to the Midrash, according to the Gemara, actually, according to the Gemara, which we will come to in the Gemara shiur, not too distant future, because it's on page 19a and we're on page 18. He did so by placing a sword in the marital bed. And he said anybody that either he or Michal that starts any hanky-panky should have this sword thrust into them. So that one explanation was that Palti remained a pure person and did not actually sleep with Michal, despite the fact that Shaul had given to him as a wife. And he is given huge praise for that in the Gemara, which we'll see in the Gemara Shir in a few weeks. That he's compared even greater than Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik resisted the temptation of the wife of Potiphar on one occasion, and he's given the title Tzaddik for that. Palti, the whole time, was given, avoided this, and he's given the praise of the Gemara even greater than Yosef HaTzadik. That's what we spoke about last time. There are two other more prosaic explanations, really less exciting, but perhaps slightly more feasible explanations than that one. One of them is what Paul just mentioned earlier on, and that is that Shaul was persuaded that, and I'm going to ask you a question, who might have persuaded him in a moment. He was persuaded that David was a mored b'malchut. He was somebody who had rebelled against the king, and therefore, as somebody who had rebelled against the king, he was liable for what punishment? What's the punishment for rebellion against the king? Yes, death, the death penalty. So he was liable for the death penalty. Shaul was persuaded that since David was liable for the death penalty, he was as if he was dead already. And therefore, in effect, Michal was not the wife of David, she was the widow of David. And therefore, it was reasonable for him to for Shaul to give Michal to Palti, because she was no longer married to David, because David was effectively dead. Okay, that was explanation number 2. By the way, that is not altogether fanciful, because we see in other places that when somebody is considered, when somebody is liable for the death penalty, they are considered as if they are already dead. So it's not completely fanciful. The third explanation, any suggestions of another explanation how it could be possible that Shaul had given his daughter Michal to Palti as a wife?
Johnny, can I just say something? In America, people who are sentenced to death are called dead man walking.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Dead man walking. Yeah. Okay, any other final suggestion? Peter, you're muted. If you're telling us something, you're muted. Oh, Peter's disappeared. Okay. Any other suggestions?
Was it one? I don't know if you mentioned it today, that he thought the first marriage was invalid for some reason or other.
Okay, that's a third explanation. You're right. We didn't mention that. There was a discussion as to whether the marriage was valid in the first place.
Yeah.
This is a very schwache Maisa, this one. This is a very weak explanation. Why is it a weak explanation? I'll tell you in a moment. The idea was that David had been promised the daughter of the king in recompense for what?
Killing Goliath.
For killing Goliath. That's right. That was his reward, was for killing Goliath. And he was also, in order to win the hand of the daughter of the king, he had to do something else. What else did he have to do? Paul, I can't hear you. If you're telling us something, you'll have to unmute.
He had to kill a number of Philistines. He killed more than the number specified.
Okay, well, he didn't have to kill them. He wasn't asked to kill them.
That's what he did.
Yeah, he wasn't asked to kill them. What was he asked to do?
Just to get rid of
The
them.
scalps.
Rid of them.
Well, yes, sort of scalps, Michael.
They're foreskins.
They're foreskins,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
right. He was you don't have to kill somebody to get their foreskin, but unless they're willing to give it you willingly, then I suppose you would have to kill them. And effectively, he was telling him to go and kill 100 Philistines. So you were absolutely right, Paul. I was just being a little pedantic in that he was asked to get 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And how many did he bring?
150.
No. He wouldn't have got the wife if he'd have only brought 50.
200.
150.
200. Yes, he brought 200. Yes, he brought 200. So there is a discussion in the Midrash as to whether the betrothal of the woman was valid because of this transaction that went on. And one opinion is that it was not a valid betrothal, and therefore the marriage was invalid in the first place. That does not hold water at all, really, because we see that Michal and David live as man and wife. Michal, in fact, saved David, didn't she, when
Your voice has gone, Johnny. Sound.
We've lost you.
Sound has gone, Johnny.
You know, looks.
I have to ring him.
He's
Give a
frozen.
message. He's frozen.
Look, you can see he's frozen.
Yeah.
Ah, no, it's you. He's also doing it. Looks like. Oh, no, he's back in. He says he's the host now.
don't know what happened there. I think we lost connection there with the internet, but seems. Can you hear me again now, everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we will see when we read the story of David and Bathsheba, of which you will be familiar, of course. We will see this next explanation come out in a bit more detail. Anybody know what I'm alluding to? The final explanation as to why it was okay for Shaul to give Michal to another man. So we've had one explanation, which was that Shaul was as if he was dead. How else can a married woman be married to somebody else?
If they hadn't had any children, then the brother would have had to marry her.
That's only if he was dead. That's true. Yes, you're right. And they didn't have any children at that stage. That's a very interesting thought, Johnny. That's a very interesting thought. I hadn't thought of that. Let's just go down that line for a moment. We've just said that one of the explanations was that David was a dead man walking. And therefore, if he's considered dead, then she's a widow. In that case, Johnny is right. Michal would have had to have married one of David's brothers.
Yeah.
Not Palti. So I've not seen that objection raised to that explanation, Johnny. That's very insightful. You're right.
Put it in your book.
Put it in the Ichidushe Poleg, yes. So okay, that's messed up that explanation. Good. Right, now there's a final explanation. How can a woman be married to another man? There are two ways. One is if he's dead and she's a widow, she's not married to him. What's the other way?
He's divorced.
Divorced.
Divorced, right. So the final explanation is that David had actually given Michal a get. Now, why would he do such a thing?
Because his life was in danger, and he'd be like the soldiers are today. They don't know. And if they don't body, then they give them a get, so then that they can get remarried and have a life.
That's right, and they don't want to try and avoid the situation of the woman being an aguna. You've all heard of that expression, yeah? Aguna. You know what the word actually means?
Chained. Is it chained?
Chained. That's right.
Chained.
She's chained to this man because he won't give her a get. Now, it generally means somebody who is refused to give a get, but it also means means when a get is not able to be given. So as we've just heard from Paul, if a person is not able to give a get, so you have a situation, God forbid, where a husband has a stroke or is in a coma or something, and is not able to actually give a get. It's a very difficult situation because the woman is then chained and cannot remarry. So what used to happen back in the day was that soldiers, when they went out to war, would give their wives what was called a get al-tanai. Al-tanai, what does that expression mean?
Conditional.
A conditional get.
A conditional get, which means if I come back, this get is null and void. If I don't come back after a certain period of time, then this get is retrospectively actioned, and it means that she can then be married to somebody else. And so the suggestion is that Shaul was chasing David. We know that. That's the whole point of this whole story at the moment. David was running away. David felt that his life was in danger, which it was. And therefore, before he ran away, and of course, who was it that helped him run away? We've just said, Michal. So before this episode, or right at the beginning of this episode, where Michal helped him escape, David gave her a get on the basis that his life was in danger. And Shaul therefore felt that it was reasonable to do that, to give Michal to another man. Okay. Again, I think that's a bit fanciful. And so actually do many of the Meforshim. We mentioned this last time, that the Meforshim are very, very critical of Shaul, and I'm just trying to find my notes on that to remind me who it was that said this. But basically, they said that what Shaul did was disregard one of the most important averot in the Torah, one of the three cardinal sins. He was not did not take care about this, and he gave Michal to Palti. And I think that is the correct explanation, that Shaul did it wrongly, and I think all the explanations that try and whitewash Shaul are incorrect. And I say that for a very simple reason, that I have a scriptural proof. I have two words which give me that scriptural proof. And I don't know if you haven't got the screen anymore. I'm going to put this screen back on for you, and who is going to be the first one to tell me where those two words are that prove to me that Shaul did this wrongly, and all those whitewash explanations are not correct. Anyone? Shall I give you a clue? Well, I'll tell you. There it is. Eshet David,
He knew
wife
that.
of David. Okay, if Michal was the wife of David, then she was not the widow of David, and she was not divorced from David. She was the wife of David. The pasuk is telling us we don't need to be told that Michal was the wife of David. We know that already. We know that because we've learned the previous chapters. So the author of Shmuel Aleph here, chapter 25, verse 44, is putting that in to tell us very clearly, in my humble opinion, that Shaul knew jolly well that Michal was still the wife of David. He knew that the marriage was valid, because if the marriage was not valid in the first place, she was never the wife of David. He knew that she was not divorced from David, because if she was divorced from David, she was not the wife of David. And he knew that she was not the widow of David, because she is still described as the wife. So I think that those two words, Eshet David, 3 words in English, wife of David, I think that tells us very clearly what we're dealing with Shaul. And again, it raises the question that we've asked a few times over the past few months, and that is why anybody would want to call their child Shaul, because he does not come over in this entire episode of his life, really. 90% of the time of it that we read about Shaul is very negative. And this is, I think, is another example of it. Shaul is a very, very significantly flawed character. So we have now completed the exercise of verse 44. We have to go back to verse 43, because I promised David Marks that we would do that right at the end of last time's shiur. So, but let's just summarize 44, the various explanations of Shaul. The explanations given are that David was a dead man walking, and so the marriage was ended. She was a widow. It was never a marriage in the first place, because the betrothal didn't work because of the deal that they did. David gave her a get, and therefore she was a free woman. We've got Johnny's objection to the dead man walking explanation, because if that's the case, then one of the brothers of David needed to marry her. That's an excellent point. And I think it's clear that the correct explanation is that Shaul did this to spite David. Remember, Shaul is not a full shilling. He's mentally unstable. We know that. He's got episodes of psychosis. We know that he's paranoid. We know that he is trying to kill David. We know that he thinks David is his enemy. And I think the only really sensible explanation is that Shaul did this deliberately, and that it was a very bad thing to do. And the Gemara and the Meforshim actually, on balance, agree with that explanation. So,
isn't it also
yeah.
possible that he didn't give her as a wife, but as a bondswoman or something else of that ilk? And I thought we said previously possibly that Palti was a very elderly gentleman, and therefore couldn't have married her in the first place.
Yeah, that's part of the that's part of the whitewash, I think. I don't think. Oh, you mean Saul had given his daughter Michal to Palti, the son of Ish. So okay. So Michael is reminding me, correct, Michael, that there is another possible explanation, that when it says Natan, he gave Michal to Palti to sort of look after him, because he was an elderly man. She was a carer for Palti, possibly. Again, maybe I need to do a bit more being done the Kafel Zechut to Shaul and giving him the benefit of the doubt. But yes, okay, Michael.
I've heard the word carer before, Johnny. I've heard the word carer before.
Yeah. Well, don't get any ideas of you and me and you with Palti and Michal. Thank you very much. I accept, Michael, that that's a possible explanation. Paul, you were going to say something as well.
No, that's not a question. Did Michal not have any children through David?
I don't think at this point she had any children.
If she'd obviously then the whole Levirate marriage wouldn't need to be
correct. We have not heard at this point of any children of Michal and David. So I think the answer to that is no. Right, let's go back to verse 43.
Rabbi Steinsel says what Michael just said about she was just placed in the house of Palti.
Yeah,
but was never married to him.
They have to come up with something. But we kiboshed that last week, Johnny, if you remember, because we if you remember what we talked about was that you'll see later on when Michal goes back to David, Palti is described as her husband. Her husband weeps after her, and he was very upset that he lost Michal, and he's called Ba'ala, her husband. So whilst it is a possibility, I'm not convinced that Scripture is supportive of that idea. Okay, let's go back to verse 43 just for a moment. David, do you want to raise what you were raising 3 weeks ago? You're muted, David.
Yeah. Okay. Did I raise the grammar there? That David, that this is another past perfect.
Yeah, you did. What you said was, what about this Achinoam? And I said to you, yes, you're right. He took Achinoam as a wife, and then he took Abigail. So Abigail actually ended up to be his third wife. Now, it doesn't... I'll just read you what Rav Bazak says about this. I'm not sure I agree with him, to be honest, but this is what he says about this last bit. This business about David taking 3 wives. Hang on a minute, that's not the right one. Here it is. Here it is. It says here, whereas David's marriage to Abigail can be seen from a positive perspective. Why can we see that as positive? Because Abigail was clearly a very, very good woman who prevented David from killing Naval. And as we will see in later chapters, Abigail has a massive positive influence on David later on, and she also prevents him from further bloodshed later on. Abigail is if you read the whole story of David's life, probably the most positive influence on David of all, probably even more than Shmuel, is Abigail. And having read all this story, because I've read on, you'll see at the end of this whole story, Abigail comes out being painted as a very, very positive character. And I recommend the name Abigail for children and daughters and granddaughters. Okay, don't call the kids Shaul, but you can call the girls Abigail. So we can understand, says Rav Bazak, why David's marriage to Abigail can be seen from a positive perspective. But he says his marriage to Achinoam arouses questions. David was already married to Michal, the daughter of Shaul. So Rav Bazak himself is not buying any of those whitewash explanations either, because he is saying that David is still married to Michal. And he says taking a third wife, that is 2 wives in addition to Michal, does not look good. And he goes on to say it should be remembered that Michal had risked her life and gone against her father Shaul in order to save David, her beloved husband. Now, we said before, we pointed out in the past that this love of Michal for David does not seem to have been reciprocated. We mentioned it before, where I showed you in the Psukim where it said Michal loved David, and it said it twice, and we don't have David loving Michal. We have David loving Jonathan. We don't have David loving Michal. And so there are two possible explanations for David's behavior in taking Achinoam as a wife. One is that he actually did not consider Michal to be his main wife, if you like, because if he had one wife who he really adored, then he wouldn't need another one, would he? So that's one explanation. A bit harsh, I think. I think a perhaps more sensible explanation is that where is Michal right now?
With Saul.
With Saul, yeah. Michal is in the house of Saul.
No, she's in Paltiel, isn't she?
Ah, okay. But before she goes to Paltiel, right? I was correct, Paul. I didn't word the question correctly. Michal, I should have asked the question, where is Michal not? And the answer is she's not with David. Okay, right. So as it were, Michal is not available to David as a wife for two possible reasons. One, either she is not there physically, she's in the house of Shaul, or if word has got back to David that Michal has now been given to Palti as a wife, well, then it's all over, isn't it? And she is effectively no longer his wife. David, of course, is not doing anything wrong in taking another wife, because at this stage in history, David was allowed to take more than one wife. The Ashkenaz Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershom only came in some 2,000 years later. So at this stage, David, there's nothing doing anything wrong. It just doesn't look good, says Rav Bazak. I don't think that.
He takes Bathsheba shortly after this.
Yes, he did.
He takes another wife.
Yeah, he did. He did. And Michal was on the scene there. So you're right, Billy, that actually later on, David, that whole episode with Bathsheba is shocking for a number of reasons. One of the ones you've just mentioned. But right at the moment, I think Rav Bazak's being a bit harsh on David because Michal's not there. She is not available to him as a wife, either because she's in the house of Shaul and he can't go back because his life is in danger, or because she's already married to somebody else. So, yes, David.
Yeah, just read on with Rav Bazak a bit, Johnny. The last two paragraphs.
Well, I don't know how to put it now. Here we go. Okay, right. So the last two paragraphs of the okay. So I'll read on. Say what David wants me to read. He says that. On the other hand, we must examine the situation from Michal's side as well. Scripture presents Michal's two identities, one alongside the other, i.e., she is Shaul's daughter on the one hand, and she's David's wife on the other. Scripture does not specify Michal's attitude to her father's action, but the silence suggests that she did not express serious objection. Later events also imply that a positive relationship developed between Michal and Palti. What caused this gap between Michal's love for and dedication to David and her marriage to Palti, the son of Laish, in chapter 25. So what happened between David, Michal is meant to love David, and then she goes off with Palti, and she seems to have a positive relationship with Palti. We know that because Palti cries when she's taken away. And then Rav Bazak says, it seems that the answer to this question lies in what was stated at length in chapter 18, that it was a one-sided love. Michal loved David. David didn't necessarily love Michal. Michal's dedication to David and ability to stand up to her father could not have continued indefinitely. With David's flight and the severance of the active bond between him and Michal, Shaul's influence upon her became stronger, and she began to feel that she is first and foremost Shaul's daughter and only secondarily David's wife. Despite all the assistance that she'd given David, she chose to stay home and did not join David in his wanderings. This choice, which in the end brought her to be married to someone else, was a fateful choice which impacted upon her life from then on until her dying day. So that explains Michal's side of things. But I still don't agree with Rav Bazak's criticism of David in taking another wife, Achinoam. If he'd have taken Achinoam after Abigail, then I think you could have leveled that criticism at him. But Michal is out of the scene as far as David's concerned, and I actually think it's reasonable, or at least not unreasonable, that he took Achinoam. Michal was conflicted all the way through. Michal is the daughter of Shaul and the wife of David, and she's got that conflict. Who else had that conflict, by the way? And who made the same choice?
Jonathan.
Jonathan, Michal's brother. Okay, remember, Jonathan is Michal's brother. Jonathan had the same choice. He could have chosen to go with David when he sends him off after the Machar Chodesh episode. Jonathan sends David off. He doesn't go with him. He could have done. If he really felt that Shaul was wrong, David was right, he could have gone with David, but he chose not to. So he had also had that conflict. Not saying that he was wrong or right, but it was a conflict.
Maybe he thought it was better positioned to protect David by staying with Shaul.
Agreed.
Yeah, maybe. I think, and of course, he did try to protect David by staying with Shaul. And you're right, it was a very, very difficult decision for Jonathan. I am in no way critical of Jonathan at all. And I think you'll remember I've said on a number of occasions that Jonathan comes out as the hero of this whole story, more so than David even, and certainly more so than Shaul. Jonathan is a heroic figure here. So I agree. I think that that's a decent explanation. But it was certainly conflicted. We can see that conflict. And you're right, Michal also had this conflict. Rav Bazak paints that conflict very clearly. And what Rav Bazak is saying is that ultimately, because David did not seem to, at least, reciprocate the love of Michal, ultimately, blood became thicker than water, and she threw her lot in, as it were, with her father Shaul. Okay, so I think we have now completed chapter 25, which was this sort of parenthetical episode of the story of Naval. When I say it's parenthetical, it's because it comes between chapter 24 and chapter 26. Now, what we're going to find when we do chapter 26 is that it is very much a follow-on from chapter 24. Not only is it a follow-on, it is almost a replica of chapter 26. And there are all sorts of questions asked as to why the Tanakh needs to tell us chapter 26 at all, because it is so similar to chapter 24. So, in order for us to understand chapter 26, we have to remind ourselves of chapter 24. Now, it's a few weeks since we did chapter 24, and since none of you could even remember the exciting episode of the sword in the bed, except for Barbara, I think we better do a little bit of recapping of actually what chapter 24 was all about. So I'm going to take you back to chapter 24. I'm not going to read the whole story. I'm going to put it up on the screen and you can read it as I'm talking. The story of chapter 24 was David was hiding out in Ein Gedi. He was dobbed in by somebody to Shaul. Shaul was told where he was. Shaul then took a big army and went to try and kill David. Shaul went into a cave to relieve himself. David cornered him, had an opportunity to kill him, did not do so, but rather, what did he do? Who can remember what he did?
Cut off the bit of his garment.
Yes, he cut the corner of his robe and he said to Shaul, look, I could have killed you and I didn't. And here's the proof. I cut the corner of your garment. I didn't kill you. That's proof that I'm not any threat to you. Why are you still chasing me? Leave me alone. And what does Shaul say? You're right. Correct, Paul. You're right. He says, you're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done it. I'll be a good boy in future and I won't start with you. What did David's men say? What did David's men say? Michael?
They effectively accused him of being an idiot for not killing him.
Yeah, they did. Absolutely. They said, what, you stupid? You should have killed him. You had an opportunity to kill your enemy. You didn't do so. And David said, no, I'm not going to do it. He is the Lord's anointed. There it is on the screen, verse 7. Right? Chalila li me Hashem. He makes an oath. May Hashem forbid it to me if I should do such a thing, to stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed, because he is the Lord's anointed. David comes out of chapter 24 very, very positively. David is clearly an incredibly complex character. On the one hand, we have him showing tremendous restraint here in chapter 24, not killing somebody who he has in every entitlement to kill, actually, because Shaul is clearly a rodef. He's clearly a pursuer, and David could certainly make a good case for killing Shaul, and he doesn't do so. And yet, when it came to Naval, all Naval did was refuse to give him something which he wasn't obliged to give him anyway. And David went off on a crazy thought to go and kill everybody, not just Naval, everybody up to the last dog. I mean, this is David. He's a very complex character. On the one hand, he's got tremendous moral fiber. And on the other hand, he's got this crazy red-headed temper that was demonstrated with the story of Naval. But back in chapter 24, he's very restrained. The men say to him, you're crazy, you should have killed him. And David says, no, I'm not going to do it. He's the anointed of the Lord. And David and Shaul says, you are more righteous than I. Tzaddik ata mimeni. And remember, we talked about the comparison of the language there to one of David's ancestors. Who am I referring to? Who used that same language?
Tamar.
Correct. Tamar and Yehuda. Yehuda said, Tzadka mimeni. Tamar is more righteous than I. The same words here. And one of the Mefarshim suggests that the reason that David merited Shaul to say those words was in the merit of his ancestor Yehuda, who said those words to Tamar. And so this was chapter 24. And Shaul says, you're right, I'm sorry, you're righteous, you're more righteous than I. And he said, I know, this is Shaul at the end of chapter 24, verse 21. And now behold, I know that you, David, will reign and the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hand. How does he know that? Because Shmuel already told him. Shmuel has told him some time before. Shmuel's dead at this point, of course, but previously Shmuel has told him, God has taken the kingship from you and he's going to give it to somebody else. Shaul knows now that it's David, and he says to David, swear to me that you will not destroy my name and my father's house. And David swears to Shaul, and all seems to end happily ever after. Shaul goes to his home and David goes up to his stronghold. And we questioned, if you remember, right at the end of chapter 24, some weeks ago, we questioned why they didn't all go home together, hand in hand, walking off into the distance, all best friends again. And the answer was that David didn't trust him because, of course, Shaul is not a stable personality. David still goes back to his men up to the stronghold. And then we had the parenthetical episode of Naval before we go back to chapter 26. So what I want you to do now is to just imagine that parenthetical episode of Naval is not there because it's out of place. It's just sort of stuck in there in the middle somehow or other. The reason it's there is because of Abigail. We needed to know how Abigail came to be married to David. That's the whole reason for chapter 25. But the storyline of Shaul versus David really goes from chapter 24 to chapter 26. Now, we're going to start chapter 26 now, and we're going to see the same, more or less the same story repeated almost word for word. And all of the Mefarshim are troubled by this. Why do we need another episode which is almost exactly the same as chapter 24? So let's have a look at chapter 26 and let's see the comparisons between the two episodes. Episode in 24 and the episode in chapter 26, which we're going to start now. Where are we? That's 24. Let's go back to 26. There we go. Right, chapter 26. Hang on, I just need to, yeah, okay. So, Vayavo hazifim el Shaul, and the Ziphites came to Shaul, Hagivata, to Giva. Which Giva? Thank you, Johnny. Givat Shaul, well done. Last time I asked you all that question, I had to schlep it out of you. This time, Johnny's got it straight away.
Sorry, it's in Rabbi Stein's house. Rabbi Stein's house says it.
Okay, Johnny, you're so honest. You could have had all the credit there. Well done. So Givat Shaul, yes, it's called Givat Shaul. Why is it called Givat Shaul? Because that's where he lives. That's where his palace was. So these Zifim have come to Shaul in his palace and have said, "Hello, David mistater begivat ha-chachila al panei hayishimon." It's a rhetorical question. Is David not hiding in the hill of Hachilah before the desolate wasteland? Basically, what's happened here is that these Zifim have dobbed David in to Shaul, where he is. And there's a word here I want to show you. Mistater. It's a reflexive form, and it means to hide oneself. Mistater.
There's a mirror yesterday.
Yeah,
Say that again, Johnny.
There's a Zimirot yesterday. We could have sang at Sudat Shalashit. My dad used to sing in Manchester. Eil Mistater.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that. Eil Mistater. That means God who is hiding himself.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to sing it? Do you want to sing it to us, Johnny?
I sang it to Yaki yesterday. He said I should sing it, but I didn't.
Okay. Well, I'm not familiar with that. That's largely because being a totally unmusical family, we never sang Smear at our house. Partly because we didn't know him, and partly because we couldn't sing anyway, even if we did know him. So I'm not familiar with that. I will have a little look at it. What other where other expression do we know that uses that word or a root of that word?
Esther Panim.
Yes, Hester Panim, Billy. What does it mean?
I will hide my face. I'll be
Setter is a
outside your
secret.
world.
Setter is a secret. Listater, to hide something.
A secret, yeah. A secret is something that's hidden. Billy is right. God says, he says to us, I will astir panai. I will hide my face from you.
Yeah.
And many of the explanations of the dreadful and difficult question of where was God during the Holocaust, many of the explanations given by the rabbis is that God was hiding his face from us, and that this was the fulfillment of the prophecy that God will hide his face. When somebody hides their face from you, it means they don't want to have anything to do with you. It means they don't want to see you, they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to have anything to do with you. Hester panim, as Billy says, the hiding of the face is a terrible thing. But it's the same.
Esther Hamalka.
Esther Hamalka. Why is she called Esther Hamalka?
God doesn't appear in the book.
Again, Billy?
God doesn't appear in the book.
Okay, that's one reason why she's called Esther, because Hashem is hidden from the book. There's another reason, a more simple explanation.
She hid her identity.
She hides her identity. Yes,
Yeah.
she hides her own identity. So that's correct. And of course, when we are introduced to Esther, what are we told?
Hadassah.
Yeah, we're told that her real name is not Esther at all. Her real name is Hadassah. I must tell you a funny story about that, actually, since you mention it. I have a friend who, at that time at least, was not particularly religious or observant. Actually, that's not true. He was a very frum Reform Jew. I know that sounds a bit weird, but he was very committed Reform Jew and very Jewish, not particularly observant. And he had a child. He had a daughter around about Purim time. And he calls me up because I was his frum friend. And he calls me up to tell me he's had this baby and they want to give her a name. But they don't want to call her Esther because they've got an Aunt Esther who they don't like, who was horrible. And so she said, well, no way we can call her Esther. So we've decided to call her Vashti, because Vashti was a good woman, wasn't she? Because she refused to go and cavort before all the people. So we've decided to call her Vashti. But I thought I should just check with you first that that was okay, because we don't know anybody called Vashti. So we thought, we better just check with our frum friend. I said, no, you cannot call her Vashti. And I suggested that they called her Hadassah, because Esther, he Hadassah. And that girl, who is now almost 40, she must be probably 38, 39. I think she'll be 39 this coming Purim. She does not know to this day that had I not been in when he called me, there's a long before mobile phones, she would have been given the name Vashti and would have been stuck with that for the rest of her life. So she does not know that she has me to thank for the fact that she has a very nice name, Hadassah, and not a very horrible name, Vashti. Anyway, I digress. So, yes, Miss David Mistater Begivat Chachira. So here we have the Zifim coming and revealing David's whereabouts. Okay, and that is in the first pasuk of chapter 26. Let me take you to the first pasuk of chapter 24. No, it's chapter 2nd verse. I beg your pardon. And it says there, "Vayihi kasher shav Shaul me'acharei Plishtim, vayagidu lo lemor hinei David b'midbar ein Gedi." And it was told to him that David is in the desert of Ein Gedi. Somebody revealed his whereabouts. So that's the first comparison between chapter 24 and our new chapter, chapter 26. So comparison number 1 is somebody tells Shaul that David is hiding, and he's hiding in a certain place. Okay, next one. We'll just do one more. There's a whole load of these. We're just going to do one more now, and then we'll stop. So what does our pasuk say in chapter 26? Vayakom Shaul. Shaul arose. Vayered el midbar Ziph, and he went down to the desert of Ziph. Ve'ito shloshet alafim ish, and he took with him 3,000 men. Bechurei Yisrael. Bechurei. What's Bechurei Yisrael?
Selected, chosen.
Chosen. Very good. Bechur. Where do you say that word?
Livchor is to choose. So
Asher bachar banu.
Asher bachar banu. Asher bachar banu. We bless Hashem. Asher bachar banu, who has chosen us. Same word. There you go. Right. So he took with him 3,000 chosen men, meaning top troops. Levakesh et David, to seek out David in the wilderness of Ziph. That's chapter 26. Let's go to chapter 24. Let's have a look. Verse 3. Vayikach Shaul shloshet alafim ish bachur mikol Yisrael. Vayelech levakesh et David va'anashav. It's almost the exact same words. I mean, it is the same words. They're just slightly grammatically different. Saul took 3,000 chosen men and went to seek David. So in the first 2 psukim of our chapter, we have a complete repeat of the beginning of chapter 24. You'll see as we go on next week, please God, that there are a whole bunch more of these direct comparisons, and we will see that chapter 26 is an almost complete replica of chapter 24. Given that chapter 25 was just slotted in there to tell us that David married Abigail, we have to ask the question, and I want you to consider this question. We won't get to it next week, because next week I want to go through all the other comparisons, but we'll get to it, please God, the week after. Why the author of Shmuel Aleph saw fit to repeat the same episode in chapter 26 as in chapter 24. Why did we need to be told both of these episodes, which are almost identical? And we'll go see there are some differences, and you'll have to look carefully at the differences to answer the question. But the question arises as to why we need chapter 26 at all. So we've made a start on it. What did we do today? Just before I ask about questions, I just need to do a summary so that next week I'll know where we're up to, even if you don't. So we went through the end of chapter 25. We gave the explanations as to Michal being given to Palti. We also spoke about Achinoam having already married David before Abigail, and we spoke about Rav Bazak's view that this reflected badly on David, which I didn't agree with, and we also spoke, thanks to David, about the perspective of Michal, and that Michal and thereby also Jonathan were conflicted in their loyalties between their father and their friend on the one hand, husband on the other. So, and then we started chapter 26, and we've asked the question of, we started to show some comparisons. We will see that chapter 26 is very much like chapter 24. We will carry on with the comparisons after next week. And then we're going to discuss why we need chapter 26 at all. Okay, that is that. Any questions? David? Yes, David Marks.
Does anyone ask why the Hebrew chapter division, you've got the last verse of chapter 25 is where the paragraph starts, and then we get the first verse of chapter 26. So I'm not asking about the Christian division.
I struggled with that. I struggled with that this morning when I was preparing, actually, because I was trying to. When I read the beginning of chapter 26 in the Koren, it seemed to me that chapter 26 began with the end of chapter 25, and I thought.
I told you before about that, and I think this is catching up now.
Yeah, that's right. We've had it before. But I was struggling with it this morning because it occurred to me, I thought initially that the end of chapter 25, let's just have a look at it, the last pasuk, pasuk 44, that Shaul had given his daughter Michal, to the wife of David, to Palti. I thought that it was repeated a second time at the beginning of chapter 26 because, as David rightly points out, it appears to be at the beginning of chapter 26. It's not. It's only once. The question is where you make the end of the chapter. The end of the chapter on the screen is at the sensible place, which is verse 44 is the end of chapter 25. But in some versions, chapter 26 begins with the last pasuk of chapter 25. It's not repeated as I initially thought, because I'm looking all over to try and find out an explanation as to why it's repeated. It's not repeated. It's just where they made the chapter endings. And of course, the chapter endings were not anything to do with us. They are Christian endings. And as David points out, if you look at the Jewish paragraphs, the new paragraph does begin with the last pasuk of chapter 25. The new paragraph, I don't know if you've got it, if it shows it in the Steinsaltz where the paragraph is.
It finishes at 43 and then there's a gap.
That's the gap. Well, that's the new paragraph. And then there's no gap. There's no gap.
After that.
There's no gap between the end of chapter 25 and the beginning of chapter 26. I don't know the answer to that question. However, I'm going to hazard a guess, David, off the top of my head, that the way the paragraphs are means that there must be some connection between the fact that Shaul gave Michal to Palti to what's coming next. And what's coming next is Shaul still, despite the fact that he promised not to, he's still after David. And that's the first thing that I want to suggest, is that it fits because the fact that he gave Michal to Palti fits with my explanation of that, which is that this was a bad thing for Shaul to do. He's done it to spite David, not because of any other explanation that he thinks that David gave her a get or that Palti was an old geezer that he was being looked after by Michal. I don't buy that. I know Michael likes that explanation, but I don't like it very much because he could have given anyone. Why did he give his daughter to go and be a carer? He could have got somebody else. He could have got anybody to do that job. So I think it's all part of Shaul's anti-David behavior. That's the first thing. And I think as a result of that, I think we will see, I don't want to give too much away, but we'll see at the end of chapter 26 how David behaves. I think it is there as a marker for David's later behavior. And I'll expand on that when we get to the end of chapter 26. I don't know if that satisfies you, David, but it's a start.
But as an explanation why the non-Jewish division comes there, because even Steinsaltz puts in, but meanwhile Saul had given So he's linking it with the new marriages of David to the what happened to his existing wife.
Yeah.
So that's the logic of having it in the previous chapter.
Which is why it starts with the vow.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think logically the chapters are correct. The question is not about the chapters. The question is really about why in the Hebrew paragraphs the paragraph begins with Michal being given to somebody else, because logically that belongs at the end of chapter 25.
But you also just said that Shaul had promised David they wouldn't pursue him. He made David promise that he wouldn't kill his family when he became king. He didn't, and he said, "Oh, you're a better man than me," but he didn't actually give another promise that now you're okay, don't worry. He didn't say anything in that respect. He just said, "Now you're better than me."
That's interesting. Okay. Well, no, you're right. No, I have to admit you're right. He doesn't explicitly say he's not going to chase him. But if you were David, and if Shaul was not mentally unstable, and you heard Shaul say, "You are more righteous than I. You've repaid me with goodness, while I have repaid you with evil. And you have shown today you've dealt well with me. How the Lord delivered me into your hand, and you didn't kill me. But when a man finds his enemy, does he send him away safely? May the Lord repay you with goodness for what you have done to me on this day. And now, behold, I know that you will reign, and the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hand," and etc. You would, if you didn't know that your enemy was mentally unstable, you would probably think that he would leave you alone, no?
Or just devious, yes.
Yeah. So you're right. It doesn't explicitly say that. You're right. But I think it would have been reasonable for David to assume that was the case. But the fact that David's wife was given to Michal and the fact that his whereabouts were given over to Shaul clearly shows, and what's coming up in chapter 26 clearly shows that perhaps David was right not to go hand in hand with Shaul back into the sunset, and he was right to go back to his stronghold, because we haven't finished with this whole story yet, and that's where chapter 26 comes in. Okay, let's call it a day unless anybody's got any questions. Okay, we will, please God, carry on with chapter 26 next time. Shavua Tov, everyone.
Thank you. Be careful when you're running.
Thank you.